1,000 episodes. Can you believe we are 1,000 episodes in? What started off as an idea from one of my youth group kids named Nathan Cottrell, who said, Jim, you're so good in coffee meetings, you should do a podcast. Just pretend you're sitting at the coffee table with some guys. Thus, in 2018, we launched the Man Card Podcast. We quickly changed the name. We've actually removed a lot of the old podcasts. They were so bad. But here we are today celebrating 1,000 podcast drops and the number one podcast for Christian men. Today we're looking back of the 1,000 episodes. We're going to look back at my top 10 most impactful episodes on the way to a grand. It would be unjust if I didn't start off with the 3 interviews I had with my sons, James, Darby, and Colton. Having the boys come on the show and ask them 2 questions, what did I do right and what did I do wrong, was not only vulnerable on my part, but it just opened up a beautiful conversation with my 3 sons. I'm just so proud of the men they've become. James is my namesake, so he is the 4th James in a long line of Jameses. And so being my namesake and my firstborn, James got the best of me and James got the worst of me. I don't know what he's going to say today, but I'm assuming we'll see the best and the worst all in the same podcast.
As I look back, and it's stuff that I really took for granted. And I think Darby and Colton probably did too. I mean, you never missed a sporting event. I mean, and if you did, you may have missed a couple here and there, but I've got friends that didn't even know their dads, and they would kill for their dad to have come to one football game or one wrestling match or whatever. And you still found a way to kill deer every freaking year. I mean, I think too that attests to your relationship with mom too.
Yeah.
Because about having a strong woman at home and 3 crazy boys. We ran through babysitters. We had a new one every week. So for her to stay home while you hunted, I think that shows a lot to mom, and not just her, but also to you, to have a man that she wants to do that for.
Yeah.
And that's something I strive for. With Naomi now being in soccer, I haven't missed a game. I think I'm the only person in her life that has been at every single game. So you just realize as you grow up how much those little things that you didn't even notice had such an impact. It's just the expectation.
Just kind of never really giving up. I mean, just starting the Men in the Arena. I was in the house when you started it, and so kind of watching it from the ground, and how you knew this is gonna work, even when there were times you didn't think it was gonna work, or it didn't look like it was going to. You still kept pushing forward.
Yeah, that was scary times.
Yeah, seeing you guys be active and healthy, I think definitely is something we look at.
And I think one that was huge that a lot of my friends were like, wait, what, you do that every day? Was the meals. We've talked about this, we had breakfast together, you made us lunch so we could take to school, and then we always had dinner. And it got hard, we played sports, and so it wasn't always perfect, right? It looks different as you get older, but definitely the years up until 8th grade, pretty consistently having every meal. I think some guys listening to this, be hard for them because they get up. I've worked at a rock quarry. I've been a heavy machine operator. I get it. You get to work at before the sun rises in the winter in Oregon. You're getting to work at 6 in the morning. It makes it hard. But I think just you had the jobs where you could do that. But as a guy listening, you could still make lunch for your kids, right? Still have breakfast ready before they wake up. So I think there are things as a guy listening to this at working blue collar that they could do still. But yeah, I appreciated the meals every day. You made us lunch. Sometimes we taught you should put peanut butter on both sides because he made very soggy peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Oh, that's funny.
Next episode had to make the list. It's episode 305. It's an audio-only podcast called Wild Awakening, How a Raging Grizzly Healed My Wounded Heart by Greg Matthews. The thing that stood out to me was not necessarily the interview, but that this guy on a hunting trip in Alaska literally had his face ripped off by a bear. And it is such an amazing story. It's just so memorable. You've got to listen to it.
So I had brought the rifle. I'm sitting up. I'm camouflaged. I've put up some brush, fully camouflaged with my face and everything. And I've got the rifle next to me. I'm glassing both ridge lines. I'm glassing, how you look through the trees. You know, you're actually looking at a whole stand of trees, but you're actually looking through the trees for any movement. We've been doing that for about I think it's about 3 hours or going into the third hour now. I put the binoculars down. I'm just looking out, and I catch some movement out of my periphery to my left. At that point, I can feel my heart racing again. My respirations are changing.
Yeah.
So I go to draw the bow back, and I swing. And before me, there's a trail that one goes down the side of the knoll to my left to where my brother is. The other one comes across, which is the one I want them on, because it's a 25-yard broadside shot on that trail. When I swing the bow over, I'm sure all the blood drained from my face when I saw what I was looking at, because there standing on its back legs was a 8.5 foot, approximately 600-pound grizzly with 2 subadult grizzly cubs kind of moving around behind her. At that point, literally, I wanted to run. That was my first thought. I was able to overcome that. My second thought was hiding, because there was a big stump in front of me. I thought at this point, I could get really, really small and tuck myself under that log. But then I realized if the bear ended up taking that other trail, it hadn't spotted me yet, but if it had taken that other trail, it would have come up on my brother. My brother would have been unaware, and basically he would have been surprised and attacked possibly by that grizzly. So I made the decision to engage. I did have bear spray. I did have a 357 Magnum. I had the bow, and I had the 300 Winchester. So my only real option was the 300 Win Mag. So I grabbed that. I low crawled around a tree, came up, stood up on my tiptoes, brought the rifle up. I was shaking so bad I couldn't dial the magnification back on my scope. So I just basically held it to my hip, and still hadn't spotted me. But as soon as I said, "Whoa, bear," that thing's head swung like lightning, locked onto me. It dropped down to all fours. I saw the head begin to lower. I saw the ears fold back, that lip curl over its jaw, and then all the hair stood up on its back, and it started charging me. And we're on this, it's like, they call it tundra moss. It's like being on a trampoline. There, I can see it goes into slow motion with each grab down by her paws to propel her forward. I can see the moss flying up in the distance, and I'm convinced that there's going to be a false charge at this point.
Yeah.
So she's closing the distance at 20 yards. She's not slowing down. If nothing, she's gaining speed. At about 10 yards, I'm thinking this is where she's going to slide, give me a couple of woofs, make her presence, say, "Get out of here," and we'll go our separate ways, but it doesn't stop. It's about 12 feet. I've got the gun at my hip, got the safety off. I fire the 300 Win Mag right in its face, and it doesn't do anything. It lunges at me with its mouth open. The only thing I have is the rifle itself. So I just extend it almost like a bayonet, and the rifle barrel goes into the bear's mouth. The rifle comes back, slams me in the head right at the same moment that the bear lowers its head and hits me in the chest. And then we slide. It comes over the top of me. I'm trying to get my breath, trying to figure out what I'm going to do at this point when 2 12 to 14-inch paws land right on my shoulders, and I'm on my back, and the first bite is to my face.
Okay, first of all, are bears as fast as they say?
Absolutely.
I mean, 30 yards, she must have closed the gap back in a second, 2 seconds?
Yeah, lightning fast. It was, I'm articulating this in words, but it is happening lightning fast, even though it's going into slow motion, because it's just one of those things you realize that you possibly are going to be dead at the end of this event. The first bite tore a tennis ball size hole in my neck.
Oh.
The top of the teeth went through my cheek, through my gums, and through my jaw. And then when it bit down, it split my face into a V. So that's not a smile line right there. That is
that's a cut.
That's where but that's another miracle. The Lord put it right in my smile line, so you really can't even tell.
Yeah, you can't tell.
No, so here I am. My face is split in a V. I have a hole in my neck, and that at that point it went to reposition. I felt a gush of blood, so pushed my chin down onto my chest to try and control the bleeding, which exposed the back of my head. And that's when it took the whole back of my head and bit down into my temples and basically put my head into what felt like a vice.
Oh.
And then so at that point, just feeling the pressure, and there's nothing brave going on here. I am just trying to survive something that is just being attacked by a monster. So I start punching the nose of this thing. As the nose is hanging out here, I just start punching the nose. And then about the fourth punch, that's when it grabs my arm, raises up and does the violent head shake and basically throws and rolls me. And at this point I can't see, so I'm on my butt kind of spinning around trying to listen to where it might be. And then all of a sudden I heard the growl at the back of my head again. It took my head in the back of its mouth again. And so at that point it released. I got into survival mode. I thought the only way I could survive was getting on my belly and interlacing my fingers over my neck, my C-spine, and spreading my legs. The only thing I could think of was don't let it turn me back over onto my back. It comes up over the top of me. I can hear it breathing over the top of me. It reaches one of its paws with the claws underneath my ribs and tries to roll me. I roll right back over onto my belly and back into position. It then comes right over the top of me, sinks its teeth down through my jacket, and lifts me up by my lat completely off the ground, and then drops me. Thank God I was able to get right back in that position. But then I just assume it got really pissed because it moved more up towards my head. And that's when I felt its paw come down and kind of like it was, I don't know, trying to break my head, but it basically hooked above my ear, my scalp when it came down, and then just raked across the back of my head. And that's where it degloved the whole back of my scalp. And I just heard it sound like, like fingernails on a chalkboard. It just dug down into my skull. And so it just laid my whole scalp over. That hurt a lot.
You already said you were blind, but at some point during this 2-minute attack, you were blind and deaf.
Yes.
So I don't know. You can go back through and walk us through that part of the story. But at some point, you're laying in a pool of your own blood. You're blind and deaf. But in the midst of this storm, there was a peace, because in the midst of the attack, you write that God spoke to you. Can you walk us through that? And what did God say in the midst of that?
Well, I won't just tell you what he spoke. I'll tell you what he did. I was sitting there on that final end of things when the thing was getting the worst, as far as at least what I was hearing. He came in. I felt him come in beside me as I'm on my butt, trying to spin around, can't see to locate where the bear is. And people would say, well, you were going into shock. Yes, I was going into shock, but I realized that my ears had been ringing the whole time, that I wasn't really able to hear the full audio of the bear and its viciousness. And not only was it that, I wasn't able to see it all. And I will tell you that I've never had a dream about the attack. God protected my eyes and my ears and my heart. So, but the other thing is he came from behind me basically, and I felt like he was enshrouding me. And he basically said, Greg, I am not done with you yet. You are my son, and I need you to fight.
Episode 633 is How to Connect with Your Daughter, 15 Tools for Girl Dads. And this is part 1 from Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, a.k.a. the Dad Whisperer. Her experience with her father and what she does to help men connect with their daughters is unreal. And I just loved our episode with Michelle.
You know, it's funny. We haven't had a lot of women on the podcast. I was speaking in Alabama, and some guys kept talking about the Dad Whisperer. And at the time, I realized, wow, I've never heard of her, and she lives an hour from my house. And so we connected that way. And you have such critical information for men. And so I'm really excited to get you on this show and talk about your book, Dad, Here's What I Really Need From You, a guide for connecting with your daughter's heart.
So really speaking in a way for women I would say, how often have we been drawn to the what I call the dude or the dud?
Yeah.
Because dad isn't stepping in, and I have a father wound or a father void. So then what do? Look for love in all the wrong places. Because I'm like, I don't really care, because he's probably a player that tells you what you want to hear, but you're probably one in his lineup. Well, your daughter doesn't even know what she needs. But isn't it the same when she was born? She's 3 years old. She doesn't know what she needs. She's 5 years old. She doesn't know what she needs. So you either talk to other dads, or you go to parenting conferences, or you listen to your wife, or you read a book or a podcast. But at the end of the day, don't you keep moving forward because you love her? So it doesn't even matter if your daughter's 15, 20, 25, 35, married, single, doesn't matter. Struggling with sexual identity or gender, doesn't matter. She still needs you in her corner. And that is my manifesto, is I care about dads because I care about women. And I want to see healthier women make healthier decisions. And I've never met a woman in my entire 4+ decades of walking alongside women and being one now for almost 63 years. We never, ever regret the time we've spent with our dad when he's investing in us and listening to us and being turned toward us.
So back in episode 362, we had the late Regi Campbell on our podcast with a very small book called What Radical Husbands Do. And this book shocked me at how deep the book was, how vulnerable the book was, the outstanding advice given to men about their marriages, stuff like burn the ships, accept your bride, how you would treat your car if you knew it was the only car you'd have all your life. He brought some practical tools into this discussion that I thought every man needs to hear this.
So basically your wife had left you like you'd shared. She came back on a one day at a time basis, that contract. And you said this, I had to take radical action. I had one day to win her heart. That win got me another day. And you start off your book saying that you've been hanging on to your marriage. You said this earlier, for the past 45 years, or I think you said 37 years, but you're now at 50 years of marriage. So walk us through, because we have a lot of guys listening right now that are hanging by a thread. Walk us through what you mean by hanging by a thread, and tell us a little bit more about your marriage. And I know you've shared a little bit so far.
Well, I think that most men, including myself, don't take responsibility for their marriages.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized when Miriam left was that I had been way more committed to my job than I had been to my marriage.
It's a big deal.
And there was no intentionality to being a good husband. I didn't study my wife. I didn't sacrifice a lot for her. She did her thing to raise the kids, take care of the house kind of thing. I was working 60, 70 hours a week, traveling a lot. And we kind of had the roles established, but I was doing nothing to pour into her or to give her a reason to love me. And I just took her completely for granted. And you know, John Regi, my friend that I quote often, says, guys don't change from light, they change from heat.
Ooh, write that down. That's so good.
Is that good or what?
Yeah. Whoa. I'm going to remember that one. John Regi?
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy. He's sort of a mentor to me here in Atlanta. But the heat of looking around at my house with my wife gone and seeing these wonderful children, and I hadn't really been a bad dad, but I was not emotionally engaged with them the way that I should have been. And so here I am with my kids for a week, and I didn't know it was going to be a week. It just turned out that way. And I realized that I needed to get after it. And with her coming back for a day, literally, I just had to start paying attention. And really, that's what Radical Husbands is about, is paying attention. And the other thing, you know, and this is early in the book, women need the security of not just hearing, not just believing, but knowing that their husbands are in it.
Yes.
And when she came back, my credibility had been zero when she left. When she came back, I looked her in the eye and I said, listen, I am yours exclusively for the rest of my life.
Wow.
Take it to the bank. I can't make you stay. I can't make you love me, but I can tell you, leaving you will never happen. Divorcing you will never happen. I'm in it. And she knew that I meant that. And I think that's one of the problems that we have in our culture, because we've made divorce so easy, and people don't even get married anymore because they don't want to have the mess of going through divorces. And so the commitment element of marriage is gotten really, really thin. My favorite analogy regarding marriage came from a friend of mine, really my first real mentor. He said, if the car you have today is the only car you could ever have for the rest of your life, how much time and attention would you pay that car? Would you take care of it? Would you change the oil? Would you maintain it on time? Would you pamper it?
That's so good.
Yeah. Better question is, how much time would you spend on the internet looking at other cars that you could never own?
Oh, stop.
How much time would you spend in a dealership kicking the tires? None. And here's the beauty. Now that I'm almost 70 and been married 50 years, I've got a classic. I've taken really good care of it for the last 37 years. And now it's a classic, and it's priceless, and you can't get it anywhere else. And if guys could just grasp just how long-term is and play for the long term, it changes the whole game. And that starts with making that commitment that says, nothing you will ever do will cause me to walk away from you. Nothing.
What would our 1,000 episodes be without an episode on forgiveness? I think forgiveness is a massive problem in the church. I think forgiveness is the source of much of our mental and physical illness. And we had Dr. Bruce Hebel's book on episode 586, Forgiving Forward. The title of that podcast episode is Forgiving the Unforgivable, 7 Steps to Overcome Your Bitterness and Find Freedom. Man, it is worth the listen.
Horrific things happened to us. We were,
Wow.
one of our children was molested by a church member. I was physically accosted in an elders meeting. We were saying, everything you do is great, but we don't want you here. There's just a lot of, and we're not perfect, but nothing really validated what happened to us. And so a lot of deep wounds. We find that oftentimes the issue with forgiveness, the presenting issue is not the real issue. It's a earlier issue. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my wife, my best friend. I didn't tell anybody because I'm a pastor. Pastors don't have problems. We fix problems. We foolishly convince ourselves. And so I just stuffed it. And finally, I'm in a crisis, and I'm meeting with a counselor who's become a really dear friend. And James said, you got a forgiveness issue, and it's toward a particular man. And I said, no, I forgave him. I wrote him a letter and told him so. And he said, you got some issues, so why don't you and God get away for a while and you ask him what it is? God mentions the same man's name and says, you haven't forgiven him. I said, sure, God, I wrote him a letter and told him so. He goes, I read your letter. You didn't forgive. You shamed him in it. And he goes, how many people have you told about all the things that I've done in that circumstance? So how is it you blame him and praise me for the same event? And I had no answer. So I made the decision for me to forgive that man for the specific things he had done that wounded me and my family. And everything in my heart and my countenance shifted. I'm singing at the top of my lungs. I'm just celebrating. I go home, share it with Tony, and she gets free. We gathered our kids together. We have a 11-hour day as a family dealing with old stuff. And they forgave the same guy and themselves and us and others, and most transformational day of our family's life.
Number 6 is one of the biggest epiphanies I've ever had in my marriage. Came with my interview with Don Minter. This is episode 178, way back then. And he talked about in the book that our brides are a picture that we are painting, and how we need to frame our wives to those around us. And I realized during this episode that I had been a tremendous, monumental failure. I had to repent. I've been working on it ever since, framing my bride as the true warrior queen she is.
But you also made a comment about your wife, and I'm talking about my wife as well. You said you need to frame this well. The area where I failed the most as a father and a husband when I was in the bubble, when my kids were all in the house, was I oftentimes, and I'm ashamed to say this, I would frame my wife as crazy, irrational, and so the kids would see her as this mom who gets crazy. You know, one of my kids said, "Mom, you're like Barney in public, but you're T-Rex in private," type of thing. And so, and I go back and I realized, and I read this in your book, I thought if our young guys can get this, we have to put our wives in the context of where we want them to be and where God wants to be. And you explain this as framing. Can you walk our younger guys and our older guys through framing and how important this is in a marriage?
Well, the reality is that the culture has it upside down. We think how we feel dictates how we think. The reality is how I think about Laura dictates how I feel about Laura. So one of the early things that I learned early on is it's simply biblical. If I will think those things which are good, pleasing, perfect, acceptable, blah, 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 it's amazing how I feel about my wife. I think she is superwoman. When I focus on her faults, well, I think she's a pretty kind of human being. So I think as we frame our spouses, Laura and I do not think negatively of each other. And let me just tell you, there's plenty of negative to think about. We just refuse to do it. And if you came to me, Jim, and said, "Hey, Don, you know, Laura's got a problem," I'd say, "Hold on, dude. You realize I got to live with this woman, right? You realize that you're polluting how I think about her. So take that conversation somewhere else, not with me, because I work very hard to think that which is good, pleasing." And I'll tell you very honestly, I'm super attracted to my wife. I think well of her. My feelings toward her are constantly good. And with that, Jim, you know, Laura talks about this a lot. We don't expose each other to negativity. And I'll just give you a silly illustration. It's in the book as well. We've never seen each other urinate. Now, that sounds silly, but I said early on, you know, sweetheart, there's some images of you that I want to carry around. One of them I'm not real interested in carrying around is you sitting on the toilet doing your business kind of thing. And I said, with that, I'm not real crazy about you thinking about my man tool as a peeing device. Framing is critical. And Laura says in the book, girls, why look at things regarding your husband that you're going to have to think about later or force yourself not to think about?
Well,
so we don't do the rude and crude in front of each other, all that kind of stuff.
Number 7 is my recent interview with Max Lucado, episode 890, Taming Your Thoughts. I've just got to tell you, just having him on the show, he's a hero. He's one of the men who discipled me as a young Christian through his books, The Grip of Grace, and what do they call him, Savior, 6 Hours One Friday, just over and over again. What an amazing man. He did not disappoint, and just having him on the show was just a wonderful moment for me, and you are going to love this excerpt from his podcast.
I'm kind of a big fan. So here's how I'm a fan of yours. When I became a brand new Christian, the guy who led me to Christ, who's the vice president of my organization today, he led me to Christ through an organization called Campus Life. He handed me a book, and he goes, "Read this," and it was God Came Near.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, it just shaking me. I told my producer, I go, "Hey, no pressure, but we probably have the most prolific Christian author in our lifetimes coming on today, but no pressure." And we just had John Eldridge 2 weeks ago, so that's saying something.
Well, thank you so much for letting me be on your program. I'm so impressed, really deeply impressed. I think you're spot on in your focus on touching the hearts of men. I pray that every man who hears our conversation is drawn closer to Christ and is inspired. And I pray that more and more men will benefit from your ministry. And I'm so proud of you. for what you're
Thank
doing.
you.
You know, I really am a great sinner. I really am. I have truly succeeded in that. By the time I was 20 years old, I was a train off the tracks. My testimony includes a lot of drinking, a lot of womanizing, a lot of fighting. I was a misogynist. I was a racist, and my dad knew it. And my dad was so opposed to alcohol because he was from a family of alcoholics. He's one of 9 kids, and at least 3 of them either went to rehab. A couple of them died in rehab, and then in our own family, my immediate family, we've had our issues. Now, if that alcoholic DNA is in my gene, I don't know, but I can specifically recall the day when I was 16 years old and I drank my first Coors, and it just the sensation in my body. It became my new best friend, and so by the time I was 20, I was just a mess. And my college roommate would invite me to church, and I would go because I knew I should. And I usually had a hangover. I didn't pay much attention. But this pastor that pastored that church, he really got grace. He really got grace. And that's exactly what I needed to hear, because I didn't think God could forgive a jerk like me. And so as he began week after week teaching about grace, finally, on March 11th, 1975, he invited people to come forward and say yes to this grace. And by then I knew if I didn't, I knew what I could see, my own family tree. I knew where I was headed. And so I did. So that was 50 years ago, 50 years ago on March 11th. And so to commemorate it on March 12th, I couldn't get it done March 11th. On March 11th, 2025, 50 years later, I got my first tattoo. I don't know if you can see it.
That I can't read it.
I know nobody can because it's
Tetelestai.
Tetelestai. It means it is paid. But when Jesus was on the cross, the next to last thing he said, as you know, was "it is finished," and the Greek word is tetelestai, meaning paid in full. And so to commemorate that Jesus, paid for my sins, I went out and got a tattoo. And some people have not. The idea of a 70-year-old pastor getting a tattoo, causes a few arched eyebrows. I did it for Jesus. And even today, as I was driving over for this interview, I was driving and I looked down and what a good reminder. There it is right there. It's tetelestai. It is paid.
Number 8 is your wife crazy? It's Love and Respect with Emerson Eggerichs. How can you not have Emerson on our show? This is episode 203. His book, Love and Respect, has sold almost 2.5 million copies. He has impacted marriages around the world, talking about his crazy cycle, talking about how men speak blue, women speak pink, speaking to us about men, our default setting is respect, women's default setting is love. Just some principles in this book that, man, you need to own this book. And this episode we had with him was off the hook. So the words is crazy cycle. What do you want to say about that?
Well, that's the result of my meditation on Ephesians 5:33, which is the summary statement in the New Testament. It would be considered, Ephesians 5 is considered the greatest treatise on marriage in the New Testament. And verse 33 is the summary, where a husband is commanded to love and the wife is commanded to respect. And again, I've had countless women say, I've read that verse, I don't know how many times, and never saw the respect side. That's where they're at. But when I then meditated, I thought, well, what happens when a wife feels unloved? When I fail to love Sarah in the way that she needs to be loved, what tends to happen? Well, she tends to negatively react in a way that feels disrespectful to me. And what happens when I feel disrespected? I have a tendency to negatively react in very naturally in a way that's unloving. And that puts us on what we call the crazy cycle. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts. And this baby starts to spin, and thus the crazy cycle. And we keep getting on it. It's like the definition of insanity that we all know is you keep doing the same thing over and over again with the same ill effect. And couples who have goodwill are confused because they keep getting on the crazy cycle and it keeps spinning and they don't know how to get off of it. And they're not really sure why they're on it. And some can't put a voice and vocabulary to the dynamic until they hear me say it. And then it's like the light bulbs go off. But the crazy cycle, without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love. And you can tell you're on it when you see the spirit of your spouse usually deflate or get provoked. And you sense the issue that we're talking about is no longer the issue.
In your book, numerous times you use the word good-willed. And so you're writing a Christian book to a Christian audience. And so your assumption there, which is a right assumption, is that these people basically want to do the right thing. And so my question is, when you meet with couples or work with couples or talk to couples after your conferences, do you find that most couples are generally good-willed and healthy? They just have been caught in the crazy cycle, or are you seeing something different?
No, I would agree with that. I mean, if you're committing adultery, and you're unfaithful and there's betrayal, there are Judases out there. But one of the points that I make is that 1 Corinthians 7, 33 and 34 says the husband is concerned about how to please his wife and the wife is concerned about how to please her husband. Yep. Now, Paul, who wrote that, wrote Romans, the great treatise on the total depravity of the human heart. I mean, Paul understood that we have a sin problem. He understood that we're selfish, but he didn't assert that in the sense that, hey, every one of you get married, you're married to an egotistical, narcissistic, prima donna, selfish, sinful, rotten, no good person. And when you have a conflict, it's just because you're married to a creep. No, I mean, no, the whole assertion is you got to give your spouse the benefit of the doubt. And in the case of the crazy cycle, I don't believe Sarah ever intends consciously, willfully, she definitely doesn't get up early in the morning to storyboard ways of dissing me throughout the day. That's never her intent.
Yeah.
And I don't get up even earlier to storyboard in the other room how I can be unloving throughout the day to her. And yet at the end of the day, I can feel disrespected. She can feel unloved. So what gives? It's because neither intend to react in that unloving or disrespectful way. It's a defensive reaction because we feel offended. We feel like they've stepped on our air hose and we're pushing them off arrows. We need love like we need air to breathe. We need respect like we need air to breathe. We have a love and respect tank connected by an air hose. So when our spouse steps on it, we're choking. We're not, so we push them off. But what we don't realize is we end up standing on their air hose and we go back and forth. And we think the other should decode. Hey, you started this. I'm just defensively reacting. I don't have ill will, and we don't. But when the other person is offended, and especially over a period of time where they continue to appeal to us to stop reacting that way, and we don't, then they begin to feel that we don't have goodwill. And one of the points I make is we've still got to place our confidence. If there's no fact that your spouse is committing adultery or is, if there's no, it's just that you're on the crazy cycle, then you have to then suspend your own feelings here and trust their deeper heart. And so when Sarah and I spin on the crazy cycle, I have to say to myself, she's not intending to be disrespectful. And I probably did or said something earlier that felt unloving to her. And so too, she needs to say, Emerson's not trying to be unloving. He would die for me if I don't kill him first. Right? So, but did I say or do something that felt disrespectful to him? It's amazing how quickly resolution and reconciliation can occur if we're willing to give the benefit of the doubt and trust the other person's goodwill, that their spirit's willing, but their flesh may be weak.
So number 9 is 1 Hour to Fix Your Marriage with Dr. Paul and Virginia Friesen. This is number 736. We recorded this whole interview and we got done and realized that our SIM card was full and we had to re-record it about 6 months later. And Paul and Virginia just bring years and years and years of marriage experience. And it's just wonderful, utilitarian ways to fix, save, build, grow your marriage.
I'm so excited to have Paul and Virginia Friesen on the podcast. Little backstory. About a year ago, we had a phenomenal interview with them, and for whatever reason, it did not record. So we are coming in for round 2, and these guys, you are going to love these guys. Here's my question then. What do you guys see in your marriage expertise? Because you're the only people I've had on who do marriage as a couple, marriage stuff. What do you see as the biggest struggle for marriages today compared to 40 years ago when you started doing this thing?
I think selfishness has always been a huge enemy. I think there's increasingly sort of an entitlement that I should have everything that's making me happy, and why should we have to do things together? I can be my own person. And I just think there are a lot of things, it started in the garden when Satan tried to isolate Adam and Eve from each other. And he's been doing that ever since. And I think today, with so many distractions, couples are just more isolated and they're looking out for their own interests. And when we started counseling years ago, we'd never see a couple before 7 or 8 years in marriage. Now we're seeing them at 6 months, 8 months, a year saying, I'm not as happy. I thought it was going to be better. So I think entitlement and selfishness, I would say.
And I would say the biggest game changer has been technology. And we got married, there was a phone on the wall. We had a TV that had a few channels. And today, with devices in hand 24/7, we just see a tremendous amount of what we call siloized lives. So husband and the wife, they each live within their own silo and they're self-contained because they have their devices, and they even text message each other when they're in the same home often. So I feel like the personal connectedness, I think that we're longing for it, but finding it very, very elusive to find. And I think part of that is just the invasion of screens in our life. They take over so much of what we used to do together. We need each other for. It seems like we need each other less in one sense because of technology. But the truth is, we will always really need each other face to face, shoulder to shoulder.
Do you find that living together before marriage, and then once they get married, they're like, okay, we've lived together, we are good to go. But once you get married, like I always tell guys, once you get the ring on her finger, she's going to start trying to change you. And once you get the ring, and once he gets the ring on your finger, he's going to go on to the next thing. So marriage changes everything. But do you think living together, in your experience, is an issue as well as technology?
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a couple come when I was on staff at church, and they were living together, and one was a believer, one wasn't. And I told them I couldn't marry them for those two reasons. And I said, but listen, if you guys split up, live separately, come to faith, I'd love to marry you. I thought that was the end. 9 months later, I married them. And during that time, they moved out. He came to faith. They shared their faith. And they have shared with us at conferences where we've led and asked them to share. And they'll say, during those year and a half when we lived together, we weren't real. She said, I would do anything he wanted sexually because I was afraid if I didn't please him, he'd kick me out.
Yep, for sure.
Said, I never challenged her about anything that annoyed me about her because I was afraid she wouldn't have sex with me that night. And they said, once we separated, we actually got to know each other better in those 9 months than in the year and a half. And I think, before marriage, we're playing our best card and we're trying to make this thing work. But afterwards, I think we become pretty lax, a lot of us, and think, hey, I've got this one nailed, and we just back off.
Number 10 is episode 240. This is with my friend Jason Karampatsos. Jason wrote a book called The Elephant in the Marriage. He determined that the most satisfied couples are those who have the most in common. You are going to love diving in to this excerpt today.
So question. So as we dive into your book, tell me about the title. I understand the idiom elephant in the room.
Yeah.
What's the elephant in the marriage?
Yeah. And so I know this is something that guys sometimes come up to me at a men's conference, like, are you calling my wife fat? Like, clearly, no. That is absolutely not what we're talking about. But it's that thing in the room that we just don't want to talk about. Like, we know it's there. We're not communicating. We're on different pages. Like, we might be on the same planet. They talk about men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Like, no, we're from the same planet. We just need to get on the same page. And there's often that reality where we're just walking through things differently. We've got different perceptions, and our perceptions create those subjective realities that we live in and we respond to. Very practical. You're sitting in a room. If you feel it's hot, you're going to turn up the air conditioning. If your wife feels, or your spouse feels that it's too cold, well, they're going to turn up the air, or they're going to turn up the heat.
Yes.
And like, the reality is the room is the temperature that it's in, but you're both responding to it differently. And so often we just don't address that. Like, we don't know the verbiage, and it's what I like about the book. It gives some terminology and some ways to be able to address, like, all right, this is what's going on. We're just seeing things differently, kind of like a parallel. And I think this is really powerful kind of on a national level when we're talking about Roe versus Wade. We're talking about the abortion debate. You know, there are those who are debating, well, it's my choice. And then those who are debating it's a life. Like, well, those are two different arguments. Like, those are two different conversations.
Yeah.
And we keep coming at those. And so that's again, a pretty dramatic one. But on a small scale, whether it's the thermostat, the finances, do we need a new car, who should do household chores, if we're coming at them, having different conversations, but we think we're discussing the same thing, because we're both talking about the gas tank or finances, then we're just, again, it's that elephant in the room. It's that thing that we're not talking about that really needs to be addressed. And when we call it for what it is, and when we really just focus in on what is there in the room, in the marriage, in the relationship, then it creates an opportunity for us to get on the same page and to actually be talking about productively the same thing and move the relationship forward.
Yeah, this is some real powerful stuff in regards to marriages. So let's do this. So you're talking about perception and perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about perspective. In the context of a marriage, how would you define perspective?
Yeah, so perspective we refer to as that more objective. It's your literal point of view. It's what you're seeing from where you're at. Like, again, right now I'm sitting here in Maryland, in New York, and I'm looking forward, and I'm seeing what I'm seeing. You're seeing what's behind me, and I'm only seeing it through my camera, but I'm not seeing it through my eye. In our marriage, we're seeing things from our point of view. I worked all day. I'm really busy. Therefore, when I get home, I shouldn't have to do the dishes. I'm seeing it from my point of view. For our spouse, their perspective, they're seeing all the things that they needed to do throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're starting by looking at things, and quite simply, we're looking at things more selfishly. We're looking at things from our point of view. We're seeing what we're seeing. And that's kind of that more literal or objective portion of
objective.
Yeah.
So if my perspective, I see a white wall, I see a picture with two people in it. Behind you, I see a white microphone.
Yeah.
You know, I see a road a buffer there. So if that's my perspective, then is my perception the subjective interpretation of what I'm seeing?
Exactly. So you're seeing a picture behind me of two people. Subjectively, you're seeing it objectively, but then you are making assumptions based upon what's there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's you, and who's that other person? Where are you? Oh, you know, we look at the shapes, we look at the textures, we look at the perspective, the angles, and then we make assumptions based upon, like you just said, all right, I see a road filter right there. You saw that, and that is your assumption. You happen to be accurate, but so often in our lives, we see something, and that's not really what is there, but it's real to us. And so we're responding. In the book, I kind of have this fictional conversation between Amber and Brandon. They're in the car on their way to church, and as they're driving, there's a moment where Amber, the wife, gets really quiet, and the husband's thinking, all right, oh, she's really into this worship song, and so he's giving her that space. But instead, she's wanting to engage in a conversation. She's over there, from her point of view, he's being quiet, which is true. Like, they will both agree, Brandon's being quiet. His perception was, oh, she wanted some space to worship with the song. She's thinking he's avoiding the conversation about finances. He's avoiding making plans for our anniversary. And so then it just kind of snowballs from there. And so often in our marriage, in our relationship, again, this is with coworkers, with our children, whatever the case might be, we see something, and then we make assumptions based upon that. Like, this happens to be a picture of me and my daughter. We were just in London back in December, and we went to the O2, and it's a picture of us climbing over the O2. But it's a picture of me with another woman. Like,
yeah.
And so you see that, and you're like, all right. And so then your mind starts to go places. Our spouse picks up our phone, and they see something. You know, there's a text from maybe like a gender neutral name, Pat or whatever the case might be. And they start assuming based upon that. Actually, I had a meeting this afternoon with someone and had one of those names. I thought I was meeting with a guy, and I get to the room and I'm meeting with a female. I saw the name and I made an assumption. My perception was who I was going to be meeting with. And so when that starts to snowball and we start responding to that in our marriages, oh yeah, we often say stupid things like that. We hear something, again, we can quote back word for word what was heard, perspective, but then our perception is our interpretation of what we think we heard or what we think they meant by that.
What would be a top 10 without a number 11, right? Hey, this is men's ministry you're talking about. So number 11 is a kind of a bonus. It's a freebie for you. This is a follow-up. It's a debrief episode with our 2022 65,000 push-up challenge where 431 guys started and only 31 finished. And the stories from the men that finished the push-up challenge are mind-boggling. Men who were paralyzed, men who were told they would never do a push-up again because of a motorcycle accident, men who had to get shoulder injections just to finish. One 12-year-old autistic boy whose dad tapped out on day one and he finished 364 days later. This is an unbelievable excerpt of grit, determination, and the ability to finish strong when so many others finish wrong.
Over 400 guys said, I'm in, and sent us their email. And right around 40 guys actually finished the challenge. These guys are as different as you can imagine, but they have one thing in common. They finished the challenge. They're named among finishers. And what separates a finisher from a quitter, I think you're going to be shocked when you hear from these guys.
About 2 years ago, I was mountain biking, and I shouldn't have been going so fast on a wet course. And I crashed my mountain bike, and I threw my left shoulder into the ground. You can see I tore my AC ligament, and it never healed properly. I've had 4 surgeries. I've had a total colectomy. And I just thought, I want to give it a shot. I want to become strong again.
My dad was in the ICU for 14 days, almost lost him. There's always going to be an excuse or reason to bail out. It wasn't just about completing the number of push-ups. It was about being the kind of man who would see the push-up challenge through, who would commit, endeavor to do it.
I started developing severe hip pain in both of my hips.
Whoa.
Ended up having 2 hip surgeries to get bone shaved out of them this year. So I remember repping out some push-ups before they took me back for surgery, as well as in a hip brace a few days out, just doing some wall push-ups just to try to keep my numbers up a little bit. People, when they think about doing 250 push-ups most days, they're like, man, this guy's crazy. I could never do that. That conversation that you have with people in that moment is, yeah, but I have a God that is strengthening me through this all and giving me the opportunity to do this. The moments that I was able to share, yes, this is such a hard moment and a hard challenge, and it's testing me every day, but this is why I'm able to do it. The bleeding of the gospel in those moments to other people that may not hear it ever.
I was in a motorcycle accident when I was 22. I'm 37 now. I basically tore my leg off. They almost took it at the knee. My whole left arm was messed up. They told me I would never do a normal full push-up, not one. So doing 65,000 last year was my spit in the face. Like, no, I will do it. I'm going to do it, and I can do it. And so anything's possible with God. Anything is possible. And here I am doing 65,000.
I've had shoulder issues I separated my shoulder the first time in like 1997. I was in football. They popped it back in. I missed 2 plays. I was back in and kept going from there. They fixed the rotator cuff my freshman year of college. A few years later, I tore my labrum. I had another cyst come up the same shoulder. So I was 3 shoulder surgeries in. So a couple of months before this challenge started, I was meeting with a friend of mine who was an orthopedic, struggling with pain. He literally brought me my x-ray and said, most shoulders this bad are about 75 or 80 years old. And he's like, you're getting a new one. I'm talking titanium. The question is not if, the question is when. That was about October of last year. Obviously, this challenge I started in January. I wanted to do 200 a day every day. It wasn't the push-ups that were the challenge. It was just the mental part of being consistent. I'm on borrowed time with this arm. I had it replaced on the 20th of December. I hit my mark of 73,000 on December the 19th, the day before it, and had this shoulder replaced. I just want to set that example of just consistency.
Back in January 2018, I became paralyzed. And I was totally paralyzed in both legs when I started this. And all the exercise. I am now walking with canes, just my left foot. I have dropped foot now. It's all coming back. So I'm up to 82,000 push-ups right about now.
There's kind of a theme going on with you guys. All of you guys had a pretty traumatizing physical injuries.
Yeah.
You guys just didn't step up to the plate and go, hey man, I'm 100%. Let's bring this thing on. Your mountain bike crash on the forehead, your blown out shoulders, your hip replacement surgeries. I mean, you guys are a mess, man. So one of the things I have noticed about the last year's challenge and this year's challenge is there's a lot of real strong starters. And so starting strong is way overrated. It's the finishes that count. Until next time, feel the wet sand on the arena floor. Hear the deafening roar of the crowd. Taste the sweetness of victory. Smell the stench of battle. Get in the game. Get dirty. Grind it out. Man, keep listening to Men in the Arena podcast. We love you guys and we appreciate you so much. Thank you for being a man.